It's a tremendous honor, really, to be considered part of this family. I consider myself very lucky to have been at CMU and gone through CMU. I was a PhD student here between 2000 and 2007. I know a lot of the faces in the room, but some not. And so for those of you that don't know me, my name is Bohus. I'm originally from Romania, and actually my travels through language kind of started back there. When in undergrad, I started working with an assistant professor that was trying to build the resources for building a speech recognizer for the Romanian language. This was circa 1999. And shortly after that, one thing led to another. I applied to grad school. I got into CMU. I came here, and I started working. I was co-advised by Alex and Ronnie. I started working with them on dialogue. Now, this was kind of, I think, on the tail end, I would say, of the communicator project, perhaps, or middle.
No, not quite. You didn't start quite in the beginning, but
yeah.
We finished with it.
Yep. So I have to share one of these. So, you know, we were working on dialogue, and this is telephony based. So I remember from the Sphinx lunches, Rich Stern showed one day one of these plots of speech recognition errors over time. And they were doing this paradoxical zigzag. And I'm like, why is it going up? Well, it's going up because we change the problem. We make it harder, right? After we get to somewhere. That's right. Yeah, well, it was very interesting, and I feel, to be honest, that we're still doing that. We're still kind of like there's still a few more hops, a few more problems we have to change to get to a really good place. But back in those days, I think the error rates were around like 10 to between 15 maybe to 30% on these telephony side dialogue systems. I'm gonna play one of these. I've looked at a lot of logs in my life at CMU. I'm gonna play one of these for you guys. The transcript, the recognition results are in between brackets.
What city are you leaving from?
Urbana-Champaign.
Sorry, I'm not sure I understood what you said. What city are you leaving from?
Urbana-Champaign.
I'm still having trouble understanding you. To go on, I need you to answer the following question. What city are you leaving from?
Chicago.
Traveling from Chicago. Where would you like to go?
Huntsville.
Traveling to Seoul. What day are you travel?
Traveling to Birmingham.
Traveling in the afternoon. Okay. What day will you be departing Chicago?
The 10th of August.
A flight tomorrow. I have a flight departing Chicago at 1:40 p.m. Arrives Seoul at 5 p.m. the next day. Do you want to take that?
My destination is Birmingham.
Traveling on Saturday.
So
departing Chicago at 1:40 p.m.
You guys get the idea, basically. So still a lot of speech recognition problems, and working on dialogue, we're like, why don't we come to this from a different angle, right? As humans, we're able to talk to each other. We sometimes get into misunderstandings, but we're able to repair all of that. So why don't we look how can we computationally repair some of these errors through dialogue? And so my dissertation ended up being on error handling in dialogue systems. The motivation chapter was very fast to write, like it was not a problem. The rest of it was more challenging. I'm not gonna bore you with technical details, but basically we're looking at problems like how does a dialogue system detect an error when it happens and understand what kind of error might have happened, what kind of strategies could you use to recover. I could ask you to repeat, I could ask you maybe to rephrase, or maybe I could go on like humans sometimes do, pretending I understood. And maybe I'll figure it out later. We were looking also at how should you choose between different kinds of strategies at any given point based on the errors, based on what you thought you detected. You know, how do you choose between different strategies and repair actions? But at the bottom of it all, I hope that some of Alex's curiosity about this whole grounding process in communication between humans dropped a little bit off on me, and I've still been very curious about that, and I've pursued it since then in my research career. So I graduated from CMU in 2007, and I moved to Microsoft Research, where I've been ever since, basically for 15 years. It's kind of crazy, time has a way of going by. Throughout my time at MSR, basically I've broadened a little bit in some sense the focus, and I'm interested in multimodal physically situated interaction. So what do we have to put in place to get computers to really reason about their physical surroundings when they interact with people and create computing systems that can interact with fluidity in physical space. And being from CMU, I've built many kinds of systems. I've been involved with virtual agents that do multi-party dialogue in the open world, robots that give directions with gaze, gesture, and speech. And more recently, we're working with a variety of mixed reality type of systems and applications. But regardless of the application domain, I think there's a lot of fascinating scientific challenges once you start thinking about how do you make computing systems that interact with people in physical space. And a lot of the challenges stem from the fact that when we're in physical space, when we're face to face, we do a lot of things that don't immediately meet the eye. There's a lot going on beyond speech. We do a lot of stuff non-verbally. And we coordinate in very fine-grained manners on a lot of nonverbal channels. I want to show you just one example. It's one of my favorite examples. This is from work by Charles Goodwin on disfluencies. I'm sure everyone in the room has seen speech transcripts, like Wayne was mentioning. If you painstakingly transcribe speech as it happens in a conversation, it's going to be very disfluent. It's going to be, very stuttering. Like, you'll hear things like, anyway, I went to bed, and stuttering, things like that. Goodwin had the interesting insight of looking at these disfluencies in conjunction with the listener's gaze. So where's the listener looking when the speaker is saying this? And it's kind of fascinating. The red regions are regions where the listener is not looking at the speaker. The black dots are where mutual gaze gets reestablished, and the black underlying regions are regions of mutual gaze. And all of a sudden, it kind of looks like it's much more grammatical in those regions, which kind of leads to this interesting conjecture that maybe these fluencies are not, or maybe not all of them, are errors in production, which is how we might think of them, but they might actually serve a coordinative role, where if I start saying something and I lose your attention, I might actually start stuttering and introducing these hesitations just to make sure that by the time you're back at me, I do the full delivery. So this is one example of very fine-grained coordination, and there's many of these. Like, we do a lot of things with gaze, we do a lot of things with how we put our bodies, how we move to space, facial expressions, hand gestures, so on and so forth. So there's a really rich space. Like I said, I think there's a lot of interesting work to be done in this space. I'm going to finish, though, bringing back on Alex asked us to reflect a bit about how CMU has influenced us. And we've heard this many times today. I think there've been many experiences, lots of brilliant people, lots of things learned. But I think if there's one thing I would put at the top of my stack is this reasonable person principle, in some sense, that we've heard talked about in many different ways today. And I've tried to carry it with me wherever I could, best I could. It wasn't that hard at MSR. We have a lot of CMU people there. But I want to end up on this story, which I think relates in some ways to this, and how Alex managed to turn a question from me that I'm not sure how reasonable it was, and turn it into something bigger in an interesting way. And it has to do also with I think the catalyzing powers of bagels for dialogue research. I think we all know how important of a catalyst pizza is for dialogue research, for speech research. But I think bagels play a similar role in dialogue. So the story is, when I joined CMU in the first semester, I took this seminar that I think Alex and I think Ronnie at the time was running on. It was a dialogue seminar where each week we would read a recent paper, and then discuss it with students. And I had such a blast with that. Like, it was the fast exposure, with really interesting, lively discussions around these papers, that when the semester ended, next semester started, I went to Alex and I said, hey, Alex, I think I want to take this class again. And, Alex looks at me and said, well, maybe that's not the greatest idea. I think he put it more delicately, but he said, look, why don't you, if you're so interested in doing something like this, why don't you find a couple of other students maybe that are interested, and you guys don't have to take a class. You can meet every Friday, and if you find a couple of other people, I'll pay for the bagels. I'll arrange the bagels, And so, of course, when people heard bagels, everyone was in. So on Fridays mornings, we started having these regular meetings, discussing papers in dialogue. And one thing led to another. Somehow people at other universities heard about this. This was all happening here. But at some point, I think Jason Williams was in Cambridge, started joining over Skype. I think Svetlana at Rochester, a bunch of people started calling in over the years. At some point in 2004, we met all of us for the first time, like with the other guys that were calling from Skype, we met at a dinner at one of these, I forget if it was an interspeech conference or something. We had such a blast. And so we said, look, this is a lot of fun without any of the adults in the room, you know, without worrying that I might say the wrong thing. Why don't we organize something? A lot of other students would probably be super sort of interested in having this kind of discussions. So we decided in 2005, we organized what we called at that time the first Young Researchers Roundtable on Spoken Dialogue Systems. This was something that was purely organized by students, you know, purposefully, no adult supervision, you know, was involved. And we got, I think, in the first one, I don't know, 25, 30 students to meet in Lisbon, I think. The fantastic thing is that I look at it, and you know, at the end of the first year, at the end of the event, it was a fantastic event. You know, everyone sent a one-pager about what they work with, and we just stayed for a day in a room and talked to each other. And at the end of that, we said, hey, next year, who's interested in organizing it? Of course, a bunch of students were up for it. I looked at it, and it's been ongoing for 18 years. Like last year, it was in Edinburgh. It's been on 4 continents. It kept going, and I think it's a tremendous thing. It's one of my favorite memories of things, you know, in relationship to CMU. And it all started from Alex's Bagels. So thanks again, Alex, and thanks, CMU.